The studio lights blazed hotter than a summer sun, casting sharp shadows across the sleek black stage. Rows of seats hummed with restless energy, hundreds of eyes fixed on the center, where two chairs faced each other like boxers in a ring. Phones glowed in the crowd, thumbs hovering over record buttons. This wasn't just another episode of Spotlight Tonight. This was a showdown. Julian Harper strode out first, his polished gray suit catching the light like a mirror. At 32, he was the golden boy of late-night TV, sharp jawline, sharper tongue, and a grin that promised trouble. He thrived on dismantling his guests, especially the ones who dared cling to old ways in a world he claimed had moved on. Tonight, he had his sights set on legend, Sylvester Stallone. The plan was simple: make an example of him, expose the cracks in his tough guy facade, and cement Julian's reputation as the king of gotcha moments. Then Stallone appeared. No fanfare, no swagger, just a man in a navy button-up, sleeves rolled to the elbows, gray hair swept back. He walked with the steady gait of someone who'd seen it all and didn't need to prove a damn thing. The crowd murmured, a mix of awe and anticipation. He settled into the chair, legs apart, hands resting easy on his thighs. If the lights made him sweat, you couldn't tell. He looked at Julian, one eyebrow slightly raised, as if to say, "Go ahead, kid. Take your shot." Julian adjusted his tie, flashed that signature smirk, and leaned into the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spotlight Tonight. Tonight, we've got a real icon, Sylvester Stallone, the man who's punched his way through Hollywood history. Mr. Stallone, thanks for joining us." Stallone nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good to be here, Julian." The crowd clapped, but Julian didn't waste time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice smooth as silk. "So, Mr. Stallone, you've built a career on characters who solve problems with fists, guns, grit, the whole tough guy package. But let's be real. In today's world, where we value dialogue, empathy, reconciliation, don't you think that kind of hero is a little extinct?" A ripple of chuckles ran through the audience, mostly from Julian's loyal fans, the ones who lived for his verbal takedowns. Stallone tilted his head, scratching his jaw like he was mulling over a puzzle. Then he chuckled, a low, genuine sound that caught Julian off guard. "Extinct, huh?" Stallone said, his voice gravelly but warm. "You're asking if I think talking beats fighting? Sure, I'd rather sit down with a coffee than throw a punch any day. But here's a question for you. Julian, someone's coming at you with a bat, ready to crack your skull. You gonna invite him for tea?" The crowd erupted, a mix of gasps and laughter. A guy in the back let out a loud, "Ha!" Julian blinked, his smirk faltering for a split second before he recovered. "Fair point," he said, leaning back with a theatrical shrug. "But I'm talking bigger picture. Society's moved past this idea that strength means brute force. Don't you think we need heroes who adapt, who show flexibility instead of just stubborn toughness?" Stallone's eyes narrowed, but he didn't tense. He leaned in slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Flexibility's great. Bend, don't break good advice. But you ever seen a nurse working a double shift, feet aching, still smiling for her patients? Or a dad pulling overtime to keep the lights on? That's not stubbornness, Julian. That's strength, the kind that doesn't buckle when the world gets heavy." The audience shifted, a few nodding. Julian's jaw tightened, but he pressed on, flipping a page on his notepad like a lawyer building a case. "Okay, let's pivot. Your films, Rocky, Rambo, they're packed with violence, blood, sweat, bullets. Don't you worry about the message that sends? Kids grow up watching you, idolizing this guy who shoots first, asks questions later. As a public figure, don't you feel a duty to give them something gentler?" Stallone exhaled through his nose, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Duty, huh? Look, I don't make movies to play teacher. I tell stories about people who get knocked down and claw their way back up. Rocky isn't about breaking jaws. It's about a guy who finds his soul in the ring. Rambo? He's a man begging for peace, but the world won't let him have it. You want to blame me for showing life's messy? Or maybe the real question is why kids aren't taught the difference between a screen and reality. Scattered applause broke out, louder this time. Julian forced a laugh, but his eyes flickered with something annoyance, maybe doubt. He wasn't used to guests who didn't stumble. Sure, but let's not kid ourselves, he said, voice sharpening. Your characters don't exactly scream vulnerability. They're stoic, unbreakable, almost robotic. In a world that's embracing emotional openness, doesn't that feel like it's holding us back? The crowd hushed, waiting. Stallone's face softened, his gaze drifting somewhere distant. You think I don't know vulnerability? He said, quieter now, almost like he was talking to himself. I've buried a son, watched friends fade away, felt dreams slip through my fingers like sand. I've cried Julian tears you wouldn't believe, but I didn't stay down. Strength isn't hiding pain. It's carrying it and still showing up. You want men to feel? I'm all for it. But don't tell me they can't be strong while they're at it. Dead silence. Then a woman in the third row started clapping, slow at first, until the whole room joined in, a rolling wave of sound. Julian's smile froze, his fingers tapping the armrest. He'd miscalculated. Stallone wasn't just holding his own, he was rewriting the script. Julian straightened, smoothing his jacket like he could smooth over the moment. He glanced at his notes, then back at Stallone, his tone shifting to something harder. All right, Mr. Stallone, I hear you. But let's get personal. Your whole persona, this unyielding, tough-as-nails vibe, it's inspiring to some, sure. But others might say it's rigid, even damaging. We're in an era where people want connection, not walls. Don't you ever feel like you're out of step with that? The crowd leaned in, sensing blood in the water. Julian's fan smirked, ready for the kill. Stallone rubbed his hands together, slow and deliberate, then locked eyes with the host. Out of step? Maybe, but let me paint you a picture. You got a teacher in a rough neighborhood, staying late to help a kid who's failing. She's tired, scared, but she's there. Or a guy on a fishing boat, hauling nets in a storm to feed his family. They're not building walls, Julian. They're holding the line. That's not rigid. That's real. A low whistle cut through the air from the back. The applause started again, sporadic but growing. Julian's lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't winning this, and he knew it. Time to up the ante. Fine, he said, but let's talk legacy. You've spent decades pushing this image grid. Muscle, no surrender. Isn't it time to let that go? Society's evolving. We don't need cavemen anymore. We need bridge builders. Stallone laughed, a deep, rolling sound that echoed off the studio walls. Cavemen. That's a good one. Tell you what bridges don't build themselves. You need hands to lay the stone, backs to carry the load. Evolving's fine, but where are we going? I see people out there, cops, farmers, moms, doing the hard stuff every day. They don't surrender because life doesn't let them. You want to call that caveman? I call it backbone. The crowd roared, some standing now, clapping like they'd just seen a knockout punch. Julian's hand hovered over his mic, flustered. He opened his mouth, but Stallone raised a palm, not aggressive, just enough to pause him. Hold up, Stallone said, voice dropping low, steady. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live. But if you think strength's the bad guy, you've never stared down something that scares you senseless. Not some debate on TV real fear. Losing your home. Watching someone you love slip away. Strength isn't for show, Julian. It's what gets you through. The room went still, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. Then it broke cheers, whistles, a surge of noise that drowned out the light's hum. Julian swallowed hard, his polished mask cracking. He'd wanted a viral moment, and he'd gotten one just not the way he planned. The cameras cut, but the energy didn't fade. Julian stood, forcing a grin as he shook Stallone's hand, muttering something about great discussion. Stallone just nodded, gave a small wave to the crowd, and walked off, shoulders loose like he'd just finished a workout. Backstage, chaos erupted. Producers barked into headsets, socials blowing up. Cut that last bit before the upload. But it was too late. Phones in the audience had caught every second, and the clips were already racing across the internet. By midnight, #StalloneSpeaks was trending worldwide. Twitter lit up with fire. Sly just schooled this smug host. Finally, someone said its strength isn't the enemy. Clips looped on YouTube Stallone's calm baritone over Julian's faltering jabs, synced with dramatic music or laughing emojis. Blogs popped up. Stallone proves Hollywood still has a heart. Even the memes rolled in Stallone's face over Rockies, captioned, asterisk, "When life hits, you hit back." The backlash wasn't far behind. Another old guy stuck in the 70s, one critic tweeted, "Strength? More like ego," sneered a think piece. But then the tide shifted. A paramedic posted, "I've pulled people from wrecks." Strength isn't optional, it's survival. A teacher shared a shaky video. "I stay late for my kids because giving up isn't in me. Stallone gets it." A trucker at a gas station went viral, grumbling into his phone. This host never hauled a load in the rain. Sly knows work. Julian's network scrambled, issuing a bland statement about diverse perspectives. Julian tweeted, "Love the debate with Mr. Stallone, respect all sides." But the damage was done. His ratings dipped, and whispers circled about shifting him to fluff pieces. He'd aimed for a scalp and ended up scalped. Stallone stayed quiet. No posts, no gloating. 3 days later, a local reporter caught him at a charity gym event in Philly, sweat on his brow, gloves on his hands. "That interview's everywhere," the reporter said, mic trembling. "You plan that?" Stallone wiped his face with a towel, took a swig of water, and shrugged. "Plan? Nah. I just said what I felt. People hear what they want to hear." The reporter pushed, but the reaction huge. "You surprised?" He chuckled, eyes crinkling. "Been around too long to be surprised. Truth's got a funny way of sticking out, doesn't it?" Then he turned back to the punching bag, like the world's noise didn't matter. Weeks later, the clips still burned bright on podcasts, news panels, even barroom TVs. People didn't just talk Stallone. They talked life. Was strength a relic, or had we lost sight of it? Did the media lift us up or just tear us down? A gym owner in Ohio saw more signups. "Kids want to be Rocky now." A single dad wrote online, "Sly's right. I don't quit because my boys need me." Julian faded into reruns, his shine dulled. Stallone didn't need the spotlight. He'd lit a spark anyway. Not with fists or bravado, but with something quieter. A fire that didn't yell, just burned steady. And in a world drowning in chatter, that fire asked one thing: what keeps you standing when the lights go out?